The oldest car still in existence in the Hall of Honor of the company that today does business under the 4 rings emblem is a Hoch dating from 1903. It is one of the very few cars still in existence that has the name of the designer on the radiator. Solid, and for its time progressive. That was already the guiding principle for the very first car built by a man born in Winningen, Germany in 1868, the son of a blacksmith. After August Hoch had supervised automobile production for Carl Benz in Mannheim for 3 years, beginning in 1896, he established himself in Cologne in 1899 as an independent entrepreneur. In a former stable, he created his vibrationless engine and designed this car with shaft drive, at the time a complex technical novelty. Already a legend as one of the oldest living German automobile pioneers, the 75-year-old August Hoch, together with his colleagues from the Auto Union Board of Directors, poses in one of his early vehicles, actually one produced in Saxony, whither he had lured capitalists and secured large investments from them in 1902. The company's new home, a former spinning mill, still stands today in Reichenbach in the Vogtland area of Germany. It was here that Hoch Tourneau's 2-cylinder engine started for the first time, after a few brave crank rotations. Instead of a workshop, Hoch now ran a manufacturing facility, up to a point. In the engine construction area, the foreman still filed the camshafts by hand, 2 a week. These methods had limitations, which is the reason why Hoch moved his company to Zwickau in 1904. There, in a real factory, he began to produce over 100 Hoch cars a year, and also to prove their performance in competition. Immediately after that, a car was produced with an overhead valve engine. I was probably the first person to position these valves in the middle of the cylinder. This car ran extraordinarily well. It is the car that won the Herkommer trial in 1906. There was no lack of prominent customers. King August of Saxony and the German Kaiser Wilhelm II were among them. Since 1904, Hoch had been building 4-cylinder cars exclusively. His philosophy was clearly stated. I made every effort to build only good, strong cars. The Hoch name is connected with the introduction of shaft drive, and with this space-saving spur gear differential using high-strength grades of steel for the gear wheels and light alloy for the crankcase and a gearbox to reduce weight, along with other new features for improving practical operation. But August Hoch was faced with resistance among his own people. By 1923, when this hunting car for the use of the King of Sweden rolled out of the factory in Zwickau, the pioneering engineer had long since left his company after a disagreement with the board of directors and shareholders. Since 1909, the only thing that Hoch cars such as this one had in common with the founder of the company was their name. For Hoch, there was no question as to whether or not he would found another automobile factory. He even did it in the same city. He succeeded in doing what no one would have thought possible. Within 72 hours, Hoch had raised 250,000 German marks. That was enough for the new Hoch factories. Nevertheless, he was not able to use the same name again, and so, like the Dixie, Dux and Corona, he used a translation. Hoch became AUDI, and the dead language of Latin once again took on new life. True to his oft-repeated promise, the Audis that Hoch designed were also good and strong and intended for demanding customers. The Type A, the very first Audi, left the Zwickau factory in July 1910. By 1914, the Audi alphabet had reached the letter E. The most famous model line was the Type C, first introduced in 1911. Hoch gave this car an engine that developed particularly high torque and was unaffected by heat, the result of experience gathered in long-distance road trials. We next produced a car, the very well-known 1435. It had 14 horsepower for tax purposes and an effective power output of 35 horsepower. I mention this because this was the car with which the Alpine rallies were later won. They were extraordinarily difficult events. One had to master almost all the Alpine passes, and the car was not allowed to stop as long as it was on the public highway. We won a number of prizes in 1912. In 1913 we won more. And in 1914 we won almost all the prizes that were awarded. That was a tremendous success. The heavy silver original trophy has been preserved and is today one of the most precious items in AUDI's historical collection. From 1923 on, there was a new emblem on the AUDI radiator that was in part a reference to the company's supremacy in the Alpine rally events. A figure 1 on top of the globe, it expressed the goal that AUDI had set for itself to continue to conquer new areas of technology and, if possible, to become #1 on the international market. Among the evidence that AUDI retained the role of a pioneer in Germany was the introduction of the first standard cars with left-hand drive and a center gear lever, years before competitors managed this. And from 1923 on, four-wheel brakes, beginning with the Type K. As a direct continuation of the Horch tradition, aluminium again returned to a position of honor. In 1923, once again earlier than most of the others, AUDI introduced a light alloy engine, the 6-cylinder Type M. In 1920, the aerodynamic engineer Paul Jahrei initiated a major trial run for cars with aerodynamically shaped bodies. AUDI was one of the few companies to participate. And incidentally, the AUDI body was made of aluminium. The AUDI design officer's work from 1930 on in the area of front-wheel drive was trailblazing and decades ahead of general development. Spurred on by the head of DKW Rasmussen, AUDI adopted front-wheel drive for the small DKW cars, modified it for the mid-sized Audi and made it ready for volume production. More than 4,400 of these unconventional cars were bought, enough to establish the AUDI front successfully on the market. Though separated from August Horch, the man who had founded the company and given it its name, his product philosophy continued to affect the company, which in the 1920s developed to remarkable size. No less a person than Gottlieb Daimler's son Paul was responsible for the Horch 8 that was introduced in Berlin in December 1926. It was one of the very first German 8-cylinder designs. Hidden beneath the distinguished sheet metal body with its restrained styling was state-of-the-art technology. Two overhead camshafts operated the valves of the engine's 8 cylinders, which were arranged in line. Even today, the smoothness with which the designers endowed the engine of this almost unrestored car is most impressive. Horch was the only automobile manufacturer in Germany to commit itself solely to 8-cylinder engines. Almost 70,000 inline and V8 engines were sold, a total not reached by any of Horch's competitors at that time. In the Concours d'Elegance that were very popular in those days, the contenders from Zwickau were polished to a high gloss and expressed much of the sheer nobility of individual travel. The emblem of an H with a crown set the standard in every way. Its legitimacy was based on much know-how in the area of large passenger vehicles with 8-cylinder engines, for which no effort was spared. The valve seats, for instance, were milled and lapped by hand. All rotating parts were balanced, even the belt pulley for the generator. Every engine ran for an hour on the test rig, 40 minutes of which were at full throttle. Horch was the first German car manufacturer to machine all parts subject to high stress with diamond cutters. The machining accuracy achieved in this way was as high as 5/1000ths of a millimetre. The absolute highlight in the history of the Hawk cars was the V12 engine, introduced in 1932, which had an intake air silencer, a 7-main bearing shaft with balance weights and hydraulic valve clearance adjusters. 80 of these cars were built, but regrettably not even a handful is still in existence today. Usually sold as a sports convertible, this car, which was superlative in elegance and refinement, was simultaneously the symbol for Hawk's dominance of the uppermost automobile category. Hawk's share of the class with engine capacity above 4 litres was a remarkable 55%. The exhibition held in Ingolstadt to commemorate August Hawk's 125th birthday produced an impressive show of automobiles bearing the signature of the man who founded the company and gave it its name. These elegant sports